Hey there, everyone. This is Clay, and this is going to be our second video, our first real video in this whole uh, communication group here. So before we go ahead and get into all of this, I want to just say, thank you so much for all the comments, all of the engagement that you gave on that welcome video and that you've put into this group so far already. I can tell this is going to be a really fun experience. Um, I can tell that a lot of you are approaching this with a genuine, real interest in learning communication, and I think that the whole metaphor of golfing has really kind of made sense to a lot of people. So, thank you so much for your feedback and all of that. Um, I also wanted to just give like a little bit of a recap, just because this is the first like real video in the whole series, whereas the other one was like technically a welcome video. Um, and I also just want to, also there's a few stragglers who are coming into the group a little bit late because I posted some things on like YouTube, and sometimes it takes a while for a YouTube video to really, grab hold and get some views. Um, Also, I just want to also let you know that there is someone doing some sort of like weed whacking or yard work or something outside the window here. So you may hear some sounds. I think it is mostly over, but you never know. I don't know why they're doing that. Like, I'm on the back side of the building by the alleyway, so I don't know why they're doing that stuff back there. But anyway, um, just to sum it all up, you can think of commitment as, if commitment was some sort of like goal or some sort of target to hit, you could think of it as if you're guiding the emotional connection toward that goal, sort of like putting a golf ball closer towards a golf hole, right? And the closer that you get, obviously you're going to be using different tools. There's a putter for doing uh, uh, a stroke that's like closer to the hole versus other clubs that you have for further back. And I'm not a golfer myself. I've played mini golf a few times, but not like legit golf before. So this metaphor may not make complete sense in like a technical sort of sense, but if you just kind of follow the line of thinking, I'm hoping that you can kind of make up for any shortcomings on my part when it comes to explaining this. Um, so yeah, we're looking at this like a game of golf, and there are obviously things that you can do that are going to move the ball closer to the hole and increase the emotional connection that's going to make someone say, yeah, I want to commit to you. Yeah, I want to be in a relationship with you. There are also things that you can do that are going to actually move the ball further away from the hole as well too. And trust me, I've never met anyone who has intentionally done these things to move the ball further away from the hole. So if you've done any of these things, don't feel bad about it. Don't feel guilty about it. Just learn kind of what the landscape is that we're dealing with right now, and adapt accordingly. Okay. So, there are certain things that can sometimes move the ball closer to the hole and sometimes move it further away from the hole, such as flirting with other people, dating other people, or threatening to date other people. We talked about this a little bit in the other video, but this can sometimes work if someone is like very, very, very near the hole and they're maybe at something like crisis point or something like that. But if someone is very, very far away from the hole, that's not going to convince someone to say, yeah, I want to commit to you, right? And so if you don't know the difference, if you don't know how close or how far from the hole you are, you won't know if that is the right card to play, so to speak, or the right club to use, if I'm going to keep my metaphors consistent here. Um, Another example of something someone might do is send like a long emotional letter or send a long emotional message. And I know that there are a lot of people that recommend that you do this. I know that there are a lot of people that instinctively feel that they need to do this. And again, in some instances, in some situations, that can make sense. But to think that it makes sense all the time is not the right move, because I think probably many people here who are going through a breakup have had the experience of sending some sort of heartfelt message to their partner or their ex, trying to explain things, trying to get a second chance or something like that, and have it just, let's just say, not do so well. I know I've definitely been there myself. I can attest to the fact that it does not work so well, at least in those initial stages of a breakup. And I've also worked with people where it has actually had a positive impact because they were at a different place on the path towards getting into that hole. The same goes with mind games, playing hard to get, reverse psychology. Sometimes that can like tap someone the final little few inches into the hole if they're like already there. But if they're very, very far away, it's also not going to work. It'll actually create more distance from the hole. Another thing that people do is what we call captive audience. It's when you just talk at someone, um, without really creating the space for a two-way dialogue. It's like you're just trying to deliver a message, and you sort of switch into like message delivery mode. You kind of become this sort of like opaque um, person who's just spewing out a message to someone else and hoping that they receive it, and you're not willing to kind of receive any sort of communication back from them. And this can be really difficult to deal with other people. I interact with a lot of people myself, just through coaching and all of that. And sometimes there are some coaching clients that will do captive audience when they get on the phone with me, and that's okay. I totally understand that, like, talking to someone like me through Zoom or through some other medium is a little bit outside of people's normal thing that they do, although maybe it's becoming the new normal these days. I don't know. Um, and oftentimes people do come to me when they have like a lot that they want to unpack. And so it's understandable that they might do that. But I also know that there are some people that just do that in conversation in general. And they just sort of go on and on and on, and they don't listen to the other person. And they just sort of go into details about irrelevant things, like a story about your old college roommate. What was his name? Oh, I forgot. Well, we used to do these things, and it's like, okay, what is the point of this, right? And it's fine if it does have a point, but we want to keep the communication a two-way dialogue, going both ways, because if it's just one way, then there's no real actual synergistic communication. We'll get into this more later in a future video, but just be aware if you do the whole captive audience thing. Another thing people do that, and when you do captive audience, it does kind of generally move the ball further away from the hole, because the other person doesn't feel heard, doesn't feel understood, right? So just be aware of that. Another thing that people do is, oftentimes they may come across as too interested. They may be very focused on the other person, very accommodating to the other person. And I understand that this comes from a genuine place, and that they genuinely do care about this other person, and they do genuinely want to have a positive interaction with that other person. However, it can sometimes shift the balance of the dynamic in a really uncomfortable sort of way. Um, and by that, I mean that the two of you are no longer interacting as equals or more or less equals, but it becomes very skewed, where you're up down here kind of looking up at this other person, basically putting them on a pedestal, trying to kind of micromanage their experience, making sure that they're okay, checking in on them when it maybe doesn't even make sense, being overly empathetic to them or overly sympathetic to them. And that just sort of shifts the dynamic out of balance. And that's not really a fun dynamic to be in for most people. Yeah, there may be certain people that, get off on having like power differences or something like that. Sure, that can make sense. But a lot of people just want to be interacting with someone who they see as more or less an equal. And most people want to be in a relationship with someone who they see as more or less an equal. And if that dynamic is out of balance too much, even one way or the other, um, then it's going to really make the dynamic very strained, and it's going to create more distance between you and the whole. Okay, we'll get into this more later. Another issue is grand romantic gestures. Now, I know that probably a lot of you are savvy enough to know that grand romantic gestures probably don't work out so well. Yeah, they seem to work out great in movies usually, but in real life, not so much. Trust me, I have done my fair share of grand romantic gestures in the past with my big ex, and they didn't go over very well either. And I know from talking to many people that they rarely work out as well too. However, that again, certain times and certain places call for certain things like this. So it could make sense in a certain context, like when you're very close to the whole, or it could make sense if maybe like one of the main issues was that they didn't think that you were serious, and so maybe you made this grand gesture of going out to visit them because you were in a long distance relationship or something like that, right? Um, but generally speaking, it doesn't go over so well because it does kind of create that imbalance in the dynamic that we just talked about. And also delivering ultimatums. That can also be something that people often think that they need to do when it comes to getting a commitment or making a relationship work. Now, again, don't get me wrong, there is absolutely a time and place for getting someone to play their hand. However, if they're very, very far from the whole, um, an ultimatum is not going to convince them to do that. If an ultimatum is going to work, it's going to be when they're very, very close to the hole. And I actually prefer what we call the fork in the road strategy, which is a little bit different than an ultimatum. It's maybe like the cousin of an ultimatum. It does have some sort of similar qualities in it, in that it kind of forces them to reveal their intentions, but it's different from an ultimatum in that it's, not necessarily like, my way or the highway kind of thing. So instead of trying to figure out what to do out of, many of the things we've just talked about, or maybe some other things that we didn't talk about, and trying to navigate like, okay, like which tool do I use to get the ball closer to the hole? Which one is the right one to use? How do I go about doing that? How do I go about picking the right tool to use or the right move to make, or like what do I do in my specific and unique situation? And what I usually do when I'm working with people to help them to make progress in whatever it is they're dealing with is I don't necessarily just look at some, magical bag of tools or anything like that, but I actually start by looking deeper than the tools. And I start by looking at what's happening on a deeper level. And what helps is if you know ahead of time if something is going to move the ball closer to the hole or further away from the hole. And we've already kind of talked about this in the first video, but what moves the ball closer towards the hole is emotional connection. And what moves the ball further away from the hole is not emotional connection, basically like demonstrating that you are not emotionally connected, demonstrating that you are on very different wavelengths, right? Um, and so, what exactly is emotional connection? What exactly is the root of that? A lot of times people will say that it's empathy, and truthfully, yes, empathy is a big factor in that. However, it can often be a little bit confusing for people. It's a little bit of an esoteric kind of term. Um, yeah, it's becoming more popular these days with the work of many people out there, but what I like better is something that kind of goes a little bit deeper than that, and that's understanding. Showing someone that you understand where they're at, that you understand what they are experiencing, that you understand their concerns or their hangups or things like that. So understanding is really, or rather demonstrating that you understand them, is really going to move the ball closer to the hole. That is to say, putting yourself in their position and doing your best to see the situation from their point of view and understand the situation with the knowledge and the perspective that they currently have. Maybe it's not the right knowledge, maybe it's not accurate to what happened, or maybe it's not accurate to your intentions. That is a topic for another time, and we'll get into that later. But um, before you are able to actually get there, you need to first receive and let what they're saying impact you, and let it kind of absorb into you, so that you can demonstrate to them that you understand what they're experiencing and that you understand how they are feeling. Okay. Um, and of course, you have to kind of put yourself in their position. You know them better than I do. You know them better than probably a lot of people out there, except for maybe their parents or something like that. And so you probably know what makes them tick. Maybe what their sensitive areas are, what their rough edges are, places that you probably shouldn't go in conversation with them, things that they are open to talking about, and things like that. So what you want to do is you want to take your knowledge and put yourself in their position. And that will start to give you a sense of understanding. I mean, if you're able to actually engage with them in conversation, yes, absolutely listen to them. Listen to them. Don't try and correct facts and say, well, no, actually, I said this, you didn't say that, or whatever. But just listen to them. Just listen to them, what they're saying, and kind of take that all in. And just based off of what they're saying and what they're experiencing, would you like to be in a dynamic like that? And most likely you probably wouldn't, if you're like actually seeking to understand them and putting yourself in their position and all of that. I mean, like with everything that's happening right now in the world, or at least in the United States anyway, I guess it's more of a United States thing, with all of the protests and everything. Like when it first started, maybe a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, I don't know at this rate, um, I actually was kind of closed off to it at first. And I think that it was because I didn't want to believe that we didn't live in this sort of equal society. I wanted to believe that we were all like treated as equals. Um, and when I actually started to realize that, and I actually was able to kind of take that veil off and actually just listen to what other people were saying, regardless of whether or not it's true or not, I'm just listening to what they're saying, and I can understand, like, yeah, if I had that experience, if I had that belief, if that was my life that I lived in, yeah, I would be frustrated too. Yes, I absolutely would be. And because of that, now I've actually been able to kind of like let go of my own belief, like, yeah, we live in this equal country, this equal society, this equal world. Um, and I'm able to actually open to the idea of hearing other people's experiences. Um, and so you want to have that sort of understanding of the other person first. You want to first seek to understand. And what this can do is it can help you to avoid things that accidentally push the ball further away from the hole. Things like sending a wall of text message. I think probably most of you know what a wall of text is. If you're new to like me, or maybe you're not in one of our courses or something like that, a wall of text is a message that people can sometimes send. It's one of those really long messages. These days, it's done mostly through text messaging. But it's one of those long messages that just kind of goes on about deep, intense, emotional things. And, very often there's like very little space. It's just like one mono paragraph. And they send it out to someone, and it very rarely goes over well, if it's even read at all. Oftentimes it's not even read because it just sort of looks really intimidating, maybe on like your lock screen or something. Or if they do open it and read it, it's like, wow, this is really heavy stuff. Like I don't even know how to start with this, right? It's just so intimidating just due to its size and the lack of visual space and the intensity behind it and all of that. Sometimes people will send in emails to us that have this sort of wall of text of all of the minute details of their situation. And it's difficult for us to often read those messages, and we're not even like emotionally entangled in this whole situation that they are with their relationship. And can you imagine how difficult it must be for their ex or their partner to actually read a message like that? And so the wall of text is sort of the written form of captive audience. And basically you're doing the opposite of listening to understand. You're just kind of communicating something one way out that way, and you're not really kind of letting the other person communicate towards you to the point where you can take it in, absorb it, understand where they're at. Okay. Again, if you've done wall of text before, no worries, happens to all of us. I've definitely been there myself. But with this understanding, I'm hoping that you can, not do that, or at least do it when the context is right. Like, for example, if there's like a lot of things that need to be said between the two of you, you say, hey, I have a lot of things on my mind. Is it okay if I send some stuff over to you? And they might say, yeah. And then you can go ahead and send it over. And then you can maybe, do them a favor and break it up into some paragraphs or something, or like drip it out over a few messages, or say like, hey, here's the first part of what I want to say. Are you okay if I send some more, or something like that, right? But that's how you might kind of adapt something like that. Another thing that people do that actually moves the ball further away from the hole is what we call robo-texting, where you just, again, turn your brain off and you just text someone like clockwork every 7 days or every 3 days or some incremental period of time, hoping that they respond to you or hoping that they engage emotionally with you. That, it matters not so much how frequently you communicate with someone as the depth of it, right? And so I don't want you to be thinking, well, should I do it once a week or 3 times a week or this amount of time or whatever? Don't be thinking of it that way, because that ignores the quality of the message. And I'd rather you message someone less frequently, but actually have a higher quality of communication that listens to them where they're at emotionally and actually builds that deeper emotional connection, because that's what's going to get the ball moving. The ball is going to move closer to the hole based off of the connection, not based off of the frequency of how often you text, right? So, I hope you can see that now. And of course, captive audience, we've already talked about that. That moves the ball further away from the hole, because it's not very rewarding to have a one-way conversation with people. And I doubt that it's actually enjoyable for the person that's doing captive audience to actually do that. I mean, like, I don't know, maybe they just don't know how to stop talking or something. I don't know. I've never actually been in that situation myself, unless I'm like talking to a camera or something like that. And then in which case I kind of have to imagine that, you're there and we're having this two-way conversation. But these are some things that people often do unintentionally that move the ball further away from the hole. And what we want to do is we want to move the ball closer to the hole, obviously. And so our main tool for doing that is understanding. Okay. So if you could go ahead and take a note card or a piece of paper, or even if you just like do it digitally on your computer or something like that, and just write the word understanding on that. You can like embellish it with like hearts or sparkles or whatever if you want to, but just write the word understanding on it, and go ahead and put that somewhere where you will see it regularly. Maybe that's on a mirror in your house that you look at regularly, or maybe it's next to your computer, or maybe it's by the door or whatever. And then just go ahead and take a photo of that and then post it as a comment to this video, okay? And once we get enough of those comments on this video, I'll know that you guys are ready, and we can go ahead and move on to our next topic, which is actually going to be about the triangle of commitment. And this is going to tell us specifically how we can create more understanding in our connections that will actually start to move that ball closer. And, there's basically 3 parts to the triangle. So we're going to be covering the 3 components of that triangle and what it actually takes to get that ball moving. Okay. So anyway, this has been the first official video in all of this. Second video, if you count the welcome video. Go ahead and post that image of your note card or piece of paper or whatever with the word understanding on it. And once we get enough of those, we'll go ahead and move on to the next video. Anyway, take care. Hope this makes sense. And if you have any questions also, feel free to ask those. We'll go ahead and clarify those. If I'm maybe not explaining everything as clearly as I could, we can go ahead and clarify anything that we need to in the group. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.